Please turn with me in your Bibles to the book of Esther, chapter 4, starting in verse 10. Esther, chapter 4, starting in verse 10. For a little bit of backstory on this, most of us know what Esther is, the story of Esther. The Jews were being threatened. Lies had been said about the Jews, and a decree went out from the king to slaughter all the Jews. And Esther was queen, but she was going to be presented with a predicament right here that she wasn't sure how to handle. Reading from the NLT, then Esther told Hathach, I'm a Maynard, please don't expect me to pronounce that right. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. Mordecai was Esther's uncle. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his golden scepter. And the king has not called for me to come for 30 days. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Esther was struggling with the idea that maybe she could do something about this slaughter. Verse 13, Mordecai sent this reply to Esther, don't think for a moment that because you are in this place, you are in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. Verse 14, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Listen to this. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? The first thing I want to point out is, I don't mean to be rude, but how stupid do you have to be to try to take out the Jews? It's like trying to take out the Bible from this world. It's not going to happen, but people after people, person after person after person, keeps believing that they can do it. This plan would ultimately fail. And I could preach about how Esther ended up risking her life for the Jews. But no, that's not what this is about. It's not what this is about. I could even preach what this is about is that last phrase. Who knows? Perhaps. In the Phillips translation, I'd like to say it, do you really believe you're the queen by coincidence? How many Bible college students are right here believing that they're here by coincidence? The title of my sermon today is What If? That'll make sense in a few moments. Please turn with me again to 1 Samuel chapter 13, starting in verse 8. We're going to talk about Saul. Now, a few chapters earlier, you can check me on this, 1 Samuel 9, verse 21. Saul first finds out that he's going to be king, and Samuel anoints him. And Saul says, who am I? I'm the least. I'm a Benjamite. We're the least in the land. He was humble. He realized that God had to do something for him. A miracle had to happen for him to become king. In verse 13, chapter 13, he's been king for 2 years. That faith that he had to have in chapter 9, before he was king, leaves him. Verse 8, Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel. Samuel, the prophet, told Saul, wait 7 days and I will come and tell you what to do. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier, but Samuel still didn't come. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away. Verse 10, just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcome him. But Samuel said, "What is this that you have done? What have you done?" Saul replied, an excuse, "I saw my men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said you would. And the Philistines are at Michmash." Sounds like a delicious apple. "Ready for battle." Verse 12. "So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help." He's making an excuse. The prophet told him what to do. God told him what to do. He's ignoring it, trying to keep the throne in his own strength. "So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came." See, this is one reason I like the NLT. Samuel says, "How foolish! What are you, stupid? You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever." I want you to notice something there. God called Saul before he called David. That throne that David would eventually take was supposed to be Saul's. It kind of reminds me back in Esther, what we just read, when Mordecai says to Esther, "If you don't help, God will raise somebody to help the Jews. It's going to happen." Saul was met with that same predicament and would lose his throne because of it. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. Some heavy stuff there. This is where I can start to preach, if you didn't think I was already. Excuse me, my notes are all jumbled up. Remember what I said the title of my sermon was? What ifs? Well, what ifs can go one of two ways. You can either say, what if I had done that? Or what if I hadn't? See, a lot of you here don't really know my testimony. I tend to keep it to myself unless I'm in private settings. But I felt a stir in my life. As a kid, when I was coming to Higgins Classical Institute, Dr. Bell, I felt a stir. I felt like I would go into ministry. I wanted to go into ministry. But as I got older, I made some mistakes. And I chose to go into the workforce after graduation. And then stuff happened, and I got hurt, and I tried blaming God for it. I was mad at God. I was mad at him. And while I was mad at him, he started pricking my heart. Do you remember that stir you felt when you were young? What if that's still there? Do you really think it's left? See, teenagers dream of being several things. And sometimes I wanted to be a basketball player. Didn't happen. NASCAR driver. I didn't even know how to drive a car. Anyway. But God reminded me of that dream. And back in 2017, before I came here, actually, let me take this off. There's a reason I didn't dress up. This is my freshman shirt from 2017. On it says, "We've only just begun." If you need proof, freshman. If you haven't figured it out, I'm not a freshman anymore. Dr. Bell, don't look so surprised. But one of my what-if moments came when I was deciding whether to go to faith school or not. FBCI, excuse me. That stirring was there. But I had to choose if I was going to go for it or hold back. And one of the questions that kept running through my mind as I was making my decision, I remember playing basketball out in the yard just by myself, thinking of all the things I was giving up. I had a full-time job. Like, God, if I'm going to do this, it's going to take some sacrifice. And I'm not even sure the call's there. When I was making that decision, I remember thinking, 30 years from now, I'm not going to care that I had this job. I'm going to ask myself, what if? What if I had tried it? What if I had trusted God for what I felt He was doing inside of me? What if I had chose to step out in faith? What could have happened? What I'm assigned to do, God could have got somebody else to do. But He called me to do it. I believe there's three types of there could be three different questions Bible students are asking right now. Perhaps, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe a few of you here, or maybe more, came here without really knowing if there was a call on your life or not. You just came here because it was convenient, inexpensive. And maybe, just maybe, you're feeling a stir. Are you really going to believe that's coincidence? Are you going to let that thought of, I'm at Bible college, everybody feels like they have a call at Bible college. Could this really be for me? Are you going to let that stop you? Or maybe you're like Saul. See, that was the Esther, the one that was unsure. She was in a position and wasn't sure, could God really use me in this? And Mordecai says, do you really think it's a coincidence? Saul got into the position. Hear me. Saul got into that position that God told him he'd get into. But then a tough time came, and it was going to require more faith than he had to use before. So what did he do? He turned to the natural to answer it. My question is, could there possibly be any FBCI students here today who came here just like me, realized you had a calling, but now you have a situation taking place, and I have a feeling some people are thinking of one right now. You had a situation take place that's making you question, do I really have what it takes? Was it a coincidence? Why? Because you're forgetting what God did back there to get you where you are now. Saul forgot, or chose to forget, what God had done for him then. I'm the least. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. How could this happen to me? And then pride swelled up in his heart. And for some reason, he thought he had to keep the kingdom. There's no telling what you might be able to do if you decide to move on from that doubt of things being a coincidence. My father always told me there's no such thing as luck, but sometimes Bible college students like to believe there is. Sometimes we look at the situations going on around us and say, no, is this call really going to happen? We see ministers come in here. I remember the first time as a freshman, there was little doubt in me concerning healing. And Ted Shuttlesworth came here. If you have any doubts concerning healing, go to a Ted Shuttlesworth conference. Anyway, I was sitting right over there. And this man walked up to him. I believe his vertebrae was cracked in 7 places from an automobile accident. And I was looking over at him like, no way. And Ted Shuttlesworth told him some stuff. He laid his hand on him. And it wasn't on purpose, but when he kind of gave him a hug, and when he did so, the mic went behind his back. And the next thing the whole congregation hear is crack. Now, if you don't believe me, all of us seniors right here remember this story. He came walking up, barely able to move. As soon as his back popped, he went running around the chapel, rejoicing over what God had just done. And this freshman, who was still struggling with coincidence, sat over there with his jaw at the floor, trying to figure out what had just happened. Because some of us see these great ministers, and we have a lot of them right here. The teachers you have, man, we're blessed. We're blessed to have these ministers here. But we look at them and we say, we could never do that. Who am I to think that? Are you believing in coincidence? Because maybe, and I'm saying that rhetorically, God has a grand call on your life to fulfill a mission that one day students will look at you and say, I'll never do that. And you'll get to teach them the things you learned right here. So, to the students who are here today, who didn't come here because they had felt a call anyway, listen to Mordecai. Don't believe this is a coincidence. And to the students who are here, just like Saul was, who have entered into their calling, don't believe this is a coincidence.